I've talked about the Manba V1 and the Manba V2 on this channel, which is this controller. But this is in fact the exact same thing as the once known B-Top, now known Beitong Kunpeng 50. The Kunpeng 50 at this point has two versions. The initial one, which from my understanding has more to do with the Manba one, and then the V2, which stands on its own when considering Manba or Beitop or Beitong, and this is what we're reviewing today. This was not said by Beitong. This was actually sent by Mini XPC, a website that sells, well, mini PCs, handheld PCs, controllers, and a bunch of other things pertaining to tech in general. So let's start with the unboxing and talk about what's different with this one and if it's worth your money. Here we have the box. Now you'll notice everything here is in Chinese, and that controller effectively is not available on the international market. That's why you can rely on a website like Mini XPC. For sure, you won't find that on, say, Best Buy or Amazon US, at least not until it's being translated. But I think they're keeping those controllers through Manba. Anyways, some night table literature if you can read Chinese. But you know, with apps like Google Translate or Apple Translate on iPhones, you can make small work of that. Here we have the controller. In the box, we have two stick caps, which as far as I can tell, the only difference is the color. There are no differences in height. They're a little hard to remove, but here we are. They both have the metal ring, but I can't really see a difference in height. They don't have a difference in feel. From using them, at least, they feel exactly the same and they operate the same, but you have an extra pair on the box. The dongle, which is 2.4, has no pairing button, so it's really associated to the specific controller. Also have what seems to be a manual. I hadn't even realized that was part of the controller, to be honest. So I'm probably just gonna translate the pages and put them on screen, but we'll also talk about software, which this controller technically has two. One is a mobile software and the other one is onboard on screen. And then I also noticed you have a screen protector for your controller screen. That's a pretty nice touch. Lastly, you have, two more stick caps. This time, same goes, they seem to be the same height, but this time they're white. So you have a set of gray, a set of gray that comes pre-installed, a set of white, and a set of black. And then to finish it all, you have the USB-C to USB. What is going on with the focusing of my camera? I don't know why it doesn't want to focus today. But here you have USB-C to USB-A cable, fairly malleable, though it's not braided. It's a fairly flexible cable. All right, now when looking at the controller itself, much like the Manba ones, you have a faceplate that you can remove, but this time around we also have a D-pad. It just doesn't come with another option, but you can remove it. And just to show you, if I was to take the faceplate from a Manba V1 or V2, I'm gonna be able to slot it right there. And we could have this as a look if we preferred. But when looking at the Manba, the D-pad is stuck in there. You can't remove it. When we're down to the sticks, it's just as simple as that. You just pull on it and they come right off. And seeing as they all come pre-installed with a metal ring on the stems, it's gonna slide and glide very easily on the controller, which indeed I can confirm is a nice smooth feel. We have optical, which pretty much with every other options that I've seen that are optical, it feels very much like a mechanical button and feel, but we're using a laser here rather than having an actual mechanical button, which will help for the overall longevity of the controller. According to the description sheet, a patented D-pad that is called Omni. That's all the details I have. I can tell you this feels very much like a low travel tactile button. We have TMR sticks. Here you have your select and start. You have your home button in here, which will be used for different shortcuts. We can see that we have rumble in here, and they call it a special patented rumble. I don't see what's patented about it. We have a USB-C up top, your shoulder buttons, which are super low travel tactile buttons. You have hair triggers, and when activating the hair trigger, we have a proper button, and otherwise it is slightly dampened. And then we have 4 extra buttons in the back, which are also short travel tactile. We have an on and off switch and the prongs here, nothing at the bottom. You'll notice the prong. That is because while I don't have the dock that comes with, it's actually sold separately. I don't have the dock that can be bought with this controller or separately, but I do have the Manba one, and it works exactly the same. It docks just fine, and that's what it looks like. And you have a door in the bottom where you can slot in your dongle. It has the screen, so this big black portion here is actually a screen. So if I hold it a couple of seconds, you'll see the RGB come up, and the little boot animation. As is with the box, everything with this controller is in Chinese. And so, of course, I'll have screenshots where I converted everything to show you guys. Just be aware that if you are getting this controller and you don't know how to read Chinese, that may be a challenge. It may be slightly difficult to navigate. And then you also have apps that are also all in Chinese. So again, something to keep in mind. The controller does have gyro. We have X input and switch mode. And of course, in terms of connectivity, we have wired, dongle, and Bluetooth. But you'll soon come to find during the testing portion of this video that you're not guaranteed to be able to connect everywhere. When you are connected to a device, you'll see this little image in the background, and that image can actually be changed. In fact, there's a lot of things that we can do with this controller, some with an app, some on board. And what we'll do now is go to my PC to look at every single thing that we can do. When it comes to the mobile app, much like the software, we'll kind of glaze through it as I put images on screen, but just sort of to give you the gist, the idea of what you should expect if you get this controller. And when looking at the software that is available on Android, I don't believe it's available on iOS, but I could be wrong about this. It's for the most part a hub. It's a hub where you have all the different controllers from Beitong/Beitop from their previous name. It's also community-based, so you have a lot of, for example, mapping for your mobile games, you have raffles, you have a customer service that is in there. Quite frankly, it's what feels like a pretty rich experience, but it's one that if you don't speak the language, you'll be met with a lot of hurdles. So as much as it's nice to see that it's there, it's something I would recommend to not rely on if you're getting this controller if you don't speak the language, because otherwise it's gonna be just difficult to navigate as a whole. But pretty much everything, as far as I could tell, everything you could do on the controller, I believe you can do with the app as well. Nothing is in English. There's also not a setting to set it to English. It's very much designed as a software that's meant to be used in China by the Chinese people. Just something to keep in mind. And I also believe the mini game to tie into that as well. So if you want to take full advantage of what this controller offers, it seems like it's a big portion of it, the community and software app, and hopefully those images will help translate how much there is. I myself will not be relying on it just because of my limitations with the language. And when talking about the onboard software to tweak your settings, it's kind of the same thing. We'll glaze over it, like the overall gist of what you can do. You have your different modes, which is PC, iOS, and then Switch. You also have an Android HID, and same goes for Android mapping. And then you also have the picture transmission feature. You have a lot of different things that you can do. You can address your dead zones, remap your buttons, have turbo, redirect your gyro. You're not really missing for anything with this controller in terms of how you can set it for yourself. And then the onboard app is how you're going to do it. Unfortunately, there are no ways to change the language, and there are options that can appear a little difficult to navigate. For example, I was not able to get the mini game working, but there is a mini game on the controller where it seems to, I really, truly, I have no idea how it works, but it's part of that experience. Much like it is the case with the Manba V1 and V2, it's nice to have a screen to navigate your controller. Here, I'm getting pretty comfortable with doing that just because I've been using it quite a lot lately to really test it, and I'm familiar with the menus without being able to read them. Thankfully, I took the translation software from my phone to be able to understand, and that helped me navigate it the first time around, but now I navigate it without the need for such a tool. You can address stick curve. I mean, again, there's really nothing that you're missing. You can recalibrate as well your stick, your triggers, and your gyro. But really, what's going to be very important is just how it feels as a whole, and let's go talk about that with my testing suite. And first is the audio test. And we have no stick tremor, no axis snapping either. Stick snapback is present. And as far as I can tell, we only have a corrected circle error, no raw. This is addressable with the onboard software, but if you set it at 0, we pretty much have no inner dead zone. There is a little bit of gap dead zone, but it's very little, to the point that I would consider that there isn't at all. And we do have a little bit of outer dead zone. It's not a whole lot, but it's present. It's pretty much a low tension stick at 50 TGF, give or take. As is the case with most TMR sticks I've seen thus far, we have a pretty good step resolution at 0.0005. When looking at diagonal focus, I've seen worse from some Kunpeng controllers. I'd say overall here it's kind of midpoint. It's decent, not the best, not the worst. Definitely usable. Rolling test from a comfort standpoint, it's not my favorite D-pad, and there's a lot of accidental up arrow if you look as I'm doing the rolling test. I don't know where that came from. As for adjacent directions, it's definitely feasible. It's not consistent though. Like I feel like sometimes I need to apply a bit more pressure for it to actuate, sometimes not as much. And when looking at accidental inputs when doing fast clicking on one arrow or going back and forth between opposite ones, it was pretty good overall. That's one test where this controller does well, and I would assume that it has to do with this tension from the middle, which we'll address in center pivot section. So when it comes to center pivot, it doesn't have one. Like it doesn't recess, but it does push down a little bit. It's kind of always under tension, which makes the D-pad extremely easy to actuate from the center. So if that's something you do a lot of, you'll be served with this controller, as it's easy to do. But again, I find that the pressure required for certain arrows is higher than others, so it's not necessarily consistent across the board. There's definitely dead zone at the start of your triggers. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's, I'd say, above average. And the end of your trigger pretty much has no dead zone at all. And by the way, this is TMR trigger, so it uses the same technology as your stick modules. When the hair trigger is off, you definitely feel dampening on these triggers as well. And when activating the hair trigger mode, you do have a proper button to actuate versus having just a software corrected distance shortened triggered. So yes, there's a button. Starting with the aiming test. Now, I feel like that was something to do with me, but it was not a good experience overall. However, with the behavior of the sticks, I don't feel like it was the sticks issue. I think it was a behind the controller issue with this one. And yeah, my scores were pretty weak overall. I don't know what it was. I looked at the sticks, like I tried to understand, but I got pretty similar results. Yeah, it's hard for me to say this, but I can't pinpoint why I was not getting good scores. I can just tell you that I wasn't, but it didn't feel like the sticks were doing me wrong. It was something else that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The D-pad fared a little bit better. Overall, I was being able to pull my moves, I want to say, at 65 to 70%. Definitely not a go-to D-pad for me personally, but some of the things that came out in the testing portion did not translate when playing Street Fighter, so I was happy to see that. Honestly, I expected to speak a little worse about the D-pad, but no, all things considered, it was good. And Celeste was really pleasant. Definitely a D-pad that I feel I would want to use and enjoy to use when playing platformers. In fact, that was probably my favorite game that I tested with this controller. It rolled off super smoothly off of that D-pad. It was a very pleasant experience. One thing I would definitely recommend, and I do find, even though it's not a symmetrical D-pad layout, the feel and the ergonomics of this controller really lends themselves nicely for D-pad playing. So yes, it was a pretty good experience. And I'd say Run, which is quite a fast action, fast paced platformer, was pretty much the same thing. I just had a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning, but then it kind of came together very nicely by the maybe second or third death. And Pocket Car was not my favorite, to be honest. One thing is the dampening portion of the trigger kind of, if you push deeper into that dampened section, it does bring your trigger to 100%. So I feel like that could be a bit of a hit and miss with some games. Also, when looking at just the feel of the triggers, they're not my favorite. They're kind of short travel, high tension, just not what I would favor for racing games in general. I feel like it's a little harder to be incremental. You do have them full analog, so where I wouldn't necessarily recommend this controller for racing, I mean, it's gonna work fine, right? And when looking at performance, it goes a lot of different ways. Mainly, the spoofing seems to be off on this controller, but the performance were extremely stable, as you can see for yourself. But what's important here is not the performance as much as it is what I was able to benchmark. You'll notice that there's no cable switch testing, there's no Bluetooth switch testing, and this is because of heavy use of hardware detection on this controller. Whenever a switch, Bluetooth for example, would connect on my PC, but it just would not be recognized by anything, Steam input, what have you, it just wasn't getting picked up. And when doing wired, you just cannot select a switch mode, it's stuck to PC iOS. And it pretty much goes the same on all devices that you plug it on. When you plug it on an Android, it'll automatically detect as Android HID. When you plug it on an iPhone, it'll automatically detect a switch. So depending on what you connect it on, it will force a mode onto you when using wired, and other modes that would otherwise work with most controllers, most third-party controllers that is, simply won't work with this controller, and I don't quite know why, but we'll continue talking about it during the Switch and Steam Deck portion. So there is a lot with this controller. Always a challenge with Beitong in the sense that it's obvious that they work on their products more than the average company. In fact, I would say that they stand out with how much work is done under the hood. But the part where I question the effort is who actually does benefit from that. And this is kind of the case here. Now, granted, being that I don't speak Chinese, I can't read Chinese, I'm losing a lot of things. Like, for example, the whole community aspect that seems to revolve around this controller. The whole mini game, there are raffles that you can win prizes. Now, would I purchase a controller on a if or maybe? Personally, no. I'd rather have something that I know exactly what it does, how it does it, and how I can benefit from it. To each their own. If you like the idea of having this fun mini game integrated in this controller, which of course I couldn't get to work, not because it doesn't work, just because I feel like I've met a limit in terms of how I can operate this thing without speaking the language. But if that is not your issue, maybe that's something that sounds fun and interesting for you. You also have a great community-based mapping solution for your mobile games as well. It doubles down as being a very capable mobile solution, as well as a Nintendo Switch solution, and of course PC Android solution. But one place where it didn't work is actually the Steam Deck. There is heavy, and I mean heavy hardware detection happening with this controller, to the point that, as you've seen with the performance portion of the video, I was not able to test certain modes on PC because it just wouldn't let me through. And so, for example, the wired switch mode, unable to do it on PC. Same goes for the Bluetooth switch mode. It would connect, it would not be picked up by my programs, and I assume that the hardware detection that comes between your controller behaving the way that you would expect it to and the hardware that it is supposed to be connected to probably appears as the front loading aspect of this controller. And what it means is, without drivers to understand what's happening, the device, be it a PC, a Steam Deck, a Nintendo Switch, may run into conflict. And I'm pretty sure this is what's happening here on the Steam Deck. For example, if you see here, it says that I'm connected with the Pro Controller, and this is the connection that I have currently going, and nothing's happening. Nothing's happening at all. And it's the same if I go into my Xbox mode, which, by the way, I'll take a minute to show you guys how that's done, because it could be complicated if you don't know. So you want to hold this little button right here. It'll open up the menu. And then as you have the top left, top is PC iOS, and then you want to go Bluetooth. But even then, it will remember the previous connection, but it will not pair into a new connection. So what you need to do is hold the house again. And it's kind of a long process to pair, but oh well. Then you go to the bottom right and then all the way down. And this is essentially to wipe the previous pairing data that the controller has. It will wipe it. And then we can see a new device to pair. And from here, I should have my controller on my Steam Deck. Here it is, Xbox wireless controller. And now we are connected. We got the vibration, and as you can see, once again, nothing is happening. It's just, it doesn't work on the Steam Deck. That goes for wired, dongle, or using Bluetooth. So if you're trying to use this on a Steam Deck, or what I would assume just Linux in general, forget it. It's not gonna work. At least it hasn't done so in my experience. But when it comes to the Switch, due to hardware detection, it'll just work. It'll work wired, it'll work using dongle, it'll work using Bluetooth. It's just gonna work. Right now I'm in pairing mode, nothing's happening. So I'm gonna go again and reset the previous pairing data. And now I should be able to connect fairly quickly with the Switch. There you go. And if I try to open it, you'll notice that it opens up the switch just fine. And as you can see here, gyro will also work fine on the Nintendo Switch, but being that I was unable to connect on Switch mode using either dongle, wired, or Bluetooth on other devices, we're not able to use Steam input to leverage the gyro data, but there is gyro. You can also have gyro redirection as we've seen during the software portion, so it's not like you're out of a solution, but just be aware that if you had specific ways of doing things, you may not be able to do it with this controller, something to keep in mind. Now, one thing that I definitely consider to be a missed opportunity with the Beitong Kunpeng 50 is that you have NFC in the background, right? As you can see right here, and that NFC is used to change the actual background image. That same NFC will not work for your amiibos when you're on the Switch mode. And that I think is potentially a little bit of a missed opportunity. It's just not something that's gonna work. Now, I guess it's not impossible that I'm the one who missed an information, and maybe it is feasible, but as far as I'm concerned, I tried and it just didn't work. From where I stand, I assume this is just not a feature, which probably not a big deal, but important to know. If you're trying to read your amiibos with that while playing on your couch, it's not gonna work. And so that moves us to the end of this review, which the Manba V1 and V2 are controllers that I have praised for good reasons. They have pretty impressive ergonomics, you have a comprehensive screen to do updates on the fly, and the V2 improved on pretty much everything to the V1. And I'd say that outside of the fact that there's a language barrier happening here, which is not Beitong's fault, I would say that for the most part, there are improvements on just pretty much everything versus the V2 as well. If ever we are to have a Manba V3 that is pretty much a copy paste of this controller, I would say go for it. It's a great upgrade overall. But if we're talking specifically about the Kunpeng 50, there are things that are happening under the hood, which is not the case with the Manba, by the way, that I think can become a bit of a hinder depending on how you're trying to game. And then there's the last thing too, which we haven't talked about, and that is the price point. You can get it on Mini XPC anywhere between 100 USD for the controller alone and 60 for the stand, or you can get both for 130. The reality is there's actually genuinely a lot happening under the hood with this controller, and that is something I simply cannot deny. If you cannot leverage the community features and mini game that you have on the controller, if you can, then it's a different business altogether. But if you can't, I do find that you lose a lot of motive for this controller. But if you've been experiencing the Manba V1 and Manba V2 and you absolutely swear by one or the other, or maybe both, the reality is, much like it is the case with the Manba V1 and Manba V2, the Kunpeng 50 has an ergonomic that just cannot be found elsewhere. It has this unique shape that is very pleasant. It also will work nicely with the covers from your other controllers. It has pretty much improved everything across the board, minus a few things in the software that I wish was different. So all in all, I would recommend it for the right person. I just think that the right person is what I would consider niche at this point in time. I don't think there's a lot of people that would knowingly go for this controller, but if you are very interested, what I would hope Beitong will do, especially if they see this video, is to release a Manba V3 or speak with Manba and have them release a V3 that has all these updates, minus maybe the software and the mini game. I feel like we're probably not the good market for that. You know, I probably wouldn't miss those if they were missing in a V3. But for everything else, I think it's a viable upgrade and it's a viable product. And so there it is, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know how you feel about the Kunpeng 50. Is it a controller you own? If so, please share your inputs. I'm curious to know how you feel about it. And if you haven't, are you more interested or less interested now? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for clicking and watching the video. As always, consider hitting a like if you enjoyed the content and to subscribe to not miss any future one. I'm Clef. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.